reproduction in unicellular organisms. Now, unicellular organisms are organisms that have one cell. They have one single cell. They exist as a single cell unit. In the single cell unit, no, in the level of organization, we have cell, we have tissue, we have organ, we have system. We are looking at organisms that exist in form of cell only. A good example of organisms like that include what? Amoeba. We have Paramecium, we have Chlamydomonas, and all the rest of them. And we also have something like Plasmodium. Plasmodium, which is also a good example of them that exists in single cell units. Today we will be looking at it based on these topics: how unicellular organisms reproduce, types of reproduction involved, and importance of reproduction. Now, before we go ahead, we need to really understand what reproduction really means. Reproduction simply means the process whereby living organisms produce their young ones, their offspring. That means it helps towards it helps in continuity, help an organism towards continue its existence. So, in this case now we're talking about unicellular organisms. Unicellular, we have two basic type of reproduction. We have number one, we have asexual. We have asexual reproduction. We also have sexual reproduction. We have sexual reproduction, asexual reproduction, and sexual reproduction. These are the two basic types of reproduction we know. Now, in asexual reproduction, in this case, the organism has to divide itself. It divides itself into two, and then when it divides into two, it forms two daughter cells. Some of them can also divide into many cells, many cell units. They can also divide into many cell units, giving us multiple cells. So in this case, we also have sexual. The sexual reproduction has to do with the situation where there's a fission of what? Gametes, where the two gametes fuse together. But unlike what we have in other multicellular organisms, unicellular organisms have a special way of undergoing this sexual reproduction. But then let's start with asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction has about is divided into many types. One of them is the one we call binary fission. We have binary fission. We have multiple fission. We also have budding. And finally, we have a spore formation. All these things are under the column of what? Asexual reproduction. Let's briefly talk about them. In binary fission, in the binary fission, what happens in binary fission is that the organism has to divide into two parts, forming two daughter cells. It's very common with organisms like Amoeba. Is very common with Amoeba and Paramecium. These are the ones that is very common with them. This is an example of organism that can undergo this binary fission. Now we'll talk about multiple fission. Multiple fission is a situation where the organism divide the nucleus have to divide multiple before they split into many cells, forming many cells. This is very, very common in Plasmodium. Plasmodium, that's the microorganism that causes what? Malaria. So this what happens there. It forms multiple daughter cells. That kind of asexual reproduction is what we call what? Multiple fission. That's what it undergoes. The next one we have there is budding. When we talk about budding, Then budding is a situation where an organism, like something like yeast is a good example of organism that undergo budding. In yeast, what happens in yeast is that I won't explain this thing. Yeast, let's say this is the, for example, this is the body, the cell of yeast. When this budding process takes place, it will grow out. There will be an outgrow around here. This outgrow will develop. As it develops, it will break out from the mother cell, forming a new cell. A new cell will be formed from this one. Once it breaks out from the mother cell, the parent cell like that. That's what we mean by budding. There are other multicellular organisms that can also do this, but rather we're talking about mainly in unicellular. But other multicellular organisms that can do this is also what we call a Hydra. Hydra is a good example of budding. Hydra also undergo budding, but this is not really what we are really looking at. We're looking at only unicellular organism where it buds. The daughter cell will grow from one part of its body after a while it cut off. The same thing is what happened in the yeast cell. So that is one of the, you should know this thing. The type of asexual reproduction where the organ, the daughter cell, grow up from the parents and then break off from the parents is what we call what? Budding, budding, asexual reproduction. Now the final one is spore formation. In spore formation, this is mainly during unfavorable condition. During unfavorable condition, when the environment is not very favorable to them, they then tend to form, so most of them, they tend to form what? Spores that will germinate and grow into daughter cells when the environment is favorable. So in some of them, a good example of this is what we call, it can also exist in something like Chlamydomonas. 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 Chlamydomonas is a good example of algae, that is plants, unicellular plants that can also undergo this kind of asexual reproduction. So what are we talking about now? Why is this reproduction very important? Okay, before we do that, let's look at the other part of before we talk about the important reproduction, let's look at the sexual reproduction. In sexual reproduction in the organisms, unicellular organisms, in sexual reproduction in unicellular organisms, what we normally have, they will have the one we call, they normally undergo a special kind of asexual reproduction, which we call conjugation. We call it conjugation. Conjugation. This process, in this process, what happened here is that the two cells will come together. They will come together like something like Paramecium. They will come together. As they come together, another example is Spirogyra. They come together and form a kind of bridge. A protrusion will come out between them and join together, making a bridge, bridging the two nuclear materials. So as the thing, as the channel connects together, as it connects together, there will be a flow of material, genetic material or nucleic material from the one of them to the next, where the other one will form inside there. It will form what we call the zygote, which germinates when the environment is very, very favorable to them. This process is what we call conjugation. That's the kind of asexual reproduction that occur in unicellular organisms, unlike what we have in the bigger multicellular organisms or the bigger animals. So this is the type we have there. Now, let's briefly talk about the importance of what reproduction. One of the basic importance is it improves vigor. It increases genetic variation, makes an organism to adapt effectively in its environment. Another one, it helps in continuity of life. That means making the organism to maintain its existence in its environment. And also another thing it does is helps an organism to adapt effectively, because when the environmental changes is taking place like that, they tend to there is tends to be a kind of variation, that genetic variation that results to a situation where those organisms become more adapted to that environment, and also help them to. Another thing it does is help organisms to do what? To increase in their population, increase the number of the organisms in the system where the environment where they find themselves. So these are the basic things I think that's very, very important at this moment. And if you're joining us for the first time, we welcome you. We thank you for coming this far. And if you have not subscribed to our channel, we want to encourage you to do so. Subscribe to our channel so that we'll be able to see more of our contents. And again, if you have any question, you can leave in the comment section. We'll always attend to you. And we're so happy to have you here. We'll always attend to you. If you have any question to ask, leave your question in the comment section. And if you really gain value from this our video, we want you to give us a like there and leave your comment there. Thank you so much. Bye.